It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend getaway in the mountains. My friend and I had rented a secluded cabin to escape the noise and stress of our city lives. The first night, we spent sitting around a bonfire, sharing stories and laughing. As the night wore on, we eventually retreated inside, lulled by the crackling fire and the tranquility of the forest. I woke up around 2 a.m. to an odd noise. At first, I thought it was one of my friends moving around, but the sound was different, more like a scratching, scraping against the wooden walls of the cabin. I sat up in bed, listening intently. The sound grew louder, accompanied by a low, guttural growl that sent chills down my spine. Quietly, I got out of bed and crept towards the window. Peering through the curtains, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, illuminated by the pale moonlight, was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. It was hunched over, its body covered in matted fur, with long, sinewy limbs and eyes that glowed an eerie yellow. Its claws raked against the cabin's wall, leaving deep gouges in the wood. Panic set in, and I backed away from the window, my heart pounding in my chest. I rushed to wake my friends, shaking them frantically. "There's something outside," I whispered urgently. They groggily sat up, confusion quickly turning to fear as the sounds grew louder and more insistent. We huddled together in the living room, debating what to do. The cabin had no cell service, and the nearest neighbor was miles away. As the scratching turned to thumping, we knew we had to take action. Armed with the fireplace poker and a few kitchen knives, we decided to investigate. My friend Jake, the bravest among us, took the lead. As we cautiously opened the front door, the creature turned its head towards us, its eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that froze me in place. It let out a bone-chilling howl and lunged forward. Jake swung the poker, connecting with the creature's side, but it barely flinched. It swiped at him with its claws, sending him sprawling to the ground. In a blind panic, I grabbed a flashlight and shone it directly into the creature's eyes. It recoiled, snarling and retreating into the shadows of the forest. We quickly dragged Jake back inside, slamming the door shut and barricading it with furniture. He had deep gashes on his arm, and we did our best to bandage him up while keeping an eye on the windows. The rest of the night was a blur of fear and adrenaline. We stayed huddled together, jumping at every noise, every creak of the old cabin. The creature's growls and scratches echoed through the darkness, a constant reminder of the danger lurking just outside. Somehow, we made it through the night, our nerves frayed and our bodies exhausted. At dawn, the forest seemed eerily quiet. We cautiously stepped outside, surveying the damage. Deep claw marks marred the walls, and tufts of fur were caught in the splintered wood. We knew we couldn't stay another night, so we quickly packed our things and made our way back to the car. As we drove away, the cabin shrinking in the rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced back one last time and thought I saw a shadow moving among the trees, yellow eyes glinting in the morning light. The memory of that night still haunts me, a reminder that there are things in the world we may never understand. Even now, back in the safety of my apartment, I find myself peeking out the window whenever I hear a strange noise. The creature from that night left more than just physical scars, it left a lasting terror that I can't quite shake. And every time I close my eyes, I see those glowing yellow eyes staring back at me, a reminder of the night we were attacked by a strange creature in the mountains.
I had just moved into my new house, a charming, if slightly run-down, Victorian on the outskirts of town. It was my first night alone, and the excitement of new beginnings filled the air. I spent the evening unpacking boxes and arranging furniture, trying to make the old house feel like home. As the clock neared midnight, I decided to call it a night. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of settling wood. I had just turned off the lights and climbed into bed, when I heard a soft knock at the front door. Startled, I glanced at my phone. 12:03 a.m. Who could be knocking at this hour? The neighborhood was quiet, and I didn't know anyone in town yet. The knock came again, louder this time, insistent. I got up, my heart pounding, and grabbed my phone. I turned on the flashlight and cautiously made my way to the front door. Peering through the peephole, I saw a woman standing on the porch. She was dressed in a long, flowing dress, her dark hair hanging loosely around her pale face. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, fixed on the door. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky. "Can I help you?" The woman didn't respond. She just stood there, staring. A chill ran down my spine. Something about her was deeply unsettling. I debated whether to open the door, but my curiosity got the better of me. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door a crack. "Are you okay?" I asked. The woman's eyes locked onto mine. "May I come in?" she asked in a whisper, her voice raspy and hollow. "Oh, I don't think that's a good idea," I stammered. "It's late, and I don't know you." Her expression didn't change. She just stood there, waiting. The air around her seemed to grow colder, and I could see my breath in the dim porch light. Every instinct told me to close the door, but something kept me rooted to the spot. "Please," she whispered again, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wind. "I need to come in." My heart raced as I struggled to decide what to do. Finally, I took a step back and shook my head. "I'm sorry, but you need to leave." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of anger. But then she simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I closed the door quickly and locked it, my hands trembling. I stood there for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart, then went back to bed, though sleep eluded me. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had all been a dream, but when I opened the front door, I found a single black feather on the doormat. I picked it up, shivering as I recalled the woman's piercing gaze. I decided to shake off the encounter and focus on settling into my new home. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I would find doors I knew I had closed standing open, and objects move from their places. At night, I heard faint whispers and footsteps echoing through the halls. One evening, as I was unpacking a box in the living room, I glanced up and saw the woman standing at the window, her face pressed against the glass, eyes wide and unblinking. Terrified, I called the police. They arrived quickly, but there was no sign of her. The officers assured me it was probably just a prank, maybe some local kids trying to scare the new neighbor, but I knew it was more than that. The final straw came a week later. I woke up in the middle of the night to find her standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. She reached out, her fingers long and skeletal, and I felt a cold hand grip my ankle. I screamed and bolted upright, only to find myself alone in the room, my skin icy and my heart pounding. I packed my bags that very night and left the house, vowing never to return. I don't know who or what that woman was, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there, waiting for another chance to visit. The house now stands empty, a silent sentinel holding its dark secrets. And somewhere in the shadows, I'm certain the strange woman is still watching. It was a warm summer evening when I first noticed the strange plant growing in my neighbor's backyard. I had lived next to the Millers for years, and our houses were separated by a low, chain-link fence. We often chatted over the fence, exchanged gardening tips, and shared the occasional barbecue. But the Millers had been away on vacation for a week, and their normally well-kept garden was beginning to look a little wild. I was watering my own garden when I saw it, a tall, dark green plant that seemed to have sprouted overnight. It stood in stark contrast to the neatly arranged flowers and shrubs that Mrs. Miller tended to so lovingly. The plant was about 6 feet tall, with thick, twisting vines that seemed almost to pulse with life. Its leaves were broad and waxy, and at the top, a large, bulbous flower was beginning to bloom, emitting a faint, sickly sweet smell. Curious and a bit uneasy, I leaned over the fence for a closer look. The flower was like nothing I'd ever seen before, with deep red petals twinned with black, giving it an almost sinister appearance. As I reached out to touch one of the vines, it seemed to recoil slightly, as if aware of my presence. I pulled my hand back, my skin tingling, where I had almost made contact. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the plant. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the image of those dark, twisted vines imprinted on my mind. I wondered if I should call the Millers, but it seemed silly to bother them about a plant. They were due back in a couple of days, so I decided to wait. The next day, I glanced out the window and saw that the plant had grown even taller, and its vines had started to spread across the yard, creeping toward my fence. The flower had fully bloomed, and the smell was stronger now, a nauseatingly sweet scent that seemed to hang in the air. I noticed that no birds or insects went near it, and the usually lively garden was eerily silent. By the third day, the plant had reached my fence. The vines clung to the metal links, and small, black thorns had started to sprout along their length. I was beginning to feel genuinely worried. What kind of plant grew this quickly and looked so unnatural? I decided to do some research, hoping to find an explanation. I spent hours online, searching for any information that matched what I was seeing, but nothing came close. The more I read, the more I became convinced that this was no ordinary plant. Desperate, I called the Millers, but their phone went straight to voicemail. I left a message, trying to explain the situation without sounding hysterical. That night, the smell was so overpowering that I had to close all the windows. I could hear the faint rustling of the vines outside, and when I looked out, I saw that they had begun to spread across my lawn. Panic set in. I grabbed a pair of garden shears and went outside, determined to cut back the invasive plant. As I approached the plant, its vines seemed to writhe and twist, almost as if they were alive. I hesitated, but then, summoning my courage, I reached out and snipped one of the vines. A thick, dark sap oozed from the cut, and the vine recoiled violently, snapping back and wrapping around my arm. I screamed, trying to pull away, but the thorns dug into my skin. I struggled, cutting at the vine with my free hand, and finally managed to break free. I stumbled back, panting, my arm bleeding from several puncture wounds. The plant seemed to shudder, its flower trembling, and then it went still. I backed away slowly, heart racing, and locked myself inside. When the Millers returned the next day, they found me in my kitchen, clutching a cup of coffee with trembling hands. I told them everything, and together, we went to their backyard. But the plant was gone, leaving only a patch of dark, withered grass, where it had stood. They listened to my story with a mix of disbelief and concern, but there was nothing left to show them. To this day, I don't know what that plant was or where it came from, but every now and then, I catch a whiff of that sickly sweet smell, and feel a prickling sensation on my skin, and I wonder if it's out there somewhere, waiting to grow again.